Hi everyone, welcome to our Sunday evening session. It's wonderful that you can join us today. This is a talk that I did for the 146th annual convention in Adyar. So if you're hearing it for a second time, thank you. I've often found it's like a bit of a movie hearing a lecture or presentation the second time. There's lots of little interesting bits that you pick up that you didn't really get the first time round. So harmony, that's an interesting one, searching for harmony. If you ask just about anybody whether they want harmony in their life, the life of their family, their country, the world, what do you think their answer is? Well, it generally is yes, of course they want harmony. So ask yourself, why do we actually get the opposite? Why is harmony so difficult to achieve? And it's somewhat like climate change. We all want a green planet and we want blue seas and beautiful, clean skies. And what we get is, choked waterways and pollution. And we find a lot of these, or probably most of these natural disasters have their root cause in the mind of humanity. So it makes one stop and think everything that's going on nowadays. And this COVID pandemic across the globe, it's a big opportunity for humanity to think, and it presents this window where humanity can help stretch its discriminative faculty, its thinking faculty, manas. And we often hear statements like, no one is safe until we are all safe. So this is good. This is a recognition of our universal unity that we talk about in the TS. So being able to think in a new way and form new and more inclusive worldview is something that will hopefully come out of this intense period. And Albert Einstein said, problems cannot be solved on the same level that they were created. So I've given quite a bit of deep thought to this topic of harmony and why humanity is not doing very well on the scorecard for quite a while. So today I want to have a look at some of the closer aspects of harmony. And the ones I've selected are science, karma, and our own personal attitude and subsequent approach to this important matter. So hopefully an analysis of these things will shed a little bit more light on the topic for us all. And then we can act, because as we know, if we don't act, then nothing much is gained, maybe a few hours of idle curiosity satisfied, but probably not much else. So when we talk of harmony, what are we actually talking about? Well, harmony is essentially a relationship in which various components exist together without destroying one another. So what might these components be? Well, they could be anything really, but Nikola Tesla spoke of some fundamental aspects of harmony when he wrote, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So if we look at music, music helps us understand this concept a lot better. So we've all heard the discord of multiple instruments. For example, when a symphony orchestra is warming up before playing, it's a bit of a racket, isn't it? But when they start, those discordant notes, they blend it into something that's really beautiful, and it doesn't destroy the previous notes. It just brings them together in a more pleasing and uplifting sound that speaks to something deeper inside us. And staying with this theme of music, you may have seen scientific experiments when sand is poured onto a piece of paper and a pure note is struck. And from this, you can form beautiful mathematical patterns. And we did this at my own lodge in Auckland some time ago. And we looked at all the various patterns made by a cello when certain strings were plucked or we used a bow. And they were quite varied and very fascinating. And if we look at water, I'm sure many of you have heard of Dr. Emoto's experiments with water. And he demonstrates how it reacts and changes depending on our thoughts, sounds, and intentions sent towards the water. So if you look at these pictures that you can see, when thoughts of love and benevolence and compassion were directed towards water, the results were aesthetically pleasing via the physical molecule formations in the water. While water exposed to fearful and discordant human intention results in disconnected, disfigured, and unpleasant physical molecule formations. He did this through magnetic resonance analysis technology and also high-speed photographs. So if you look at the one at the top left, you can see love and gratitude. But when you look at the one beside it, when someone's thinking thoughts about, oh, you disgust me, you can see how pretty ugly it is. And in the middle, we have thoughts or intention of evil. And then just to the right of that, someone with gratitude and thanking. And at the bottom left, we have Mozart Symphony number 40 versus some heavy metal. And if you look at these next set, look at the beautiful arrangements when we're looking at the words eternal and peace. And the next image down is water before and after a Buddhist prayer at Fujiwara Dam in Japan. And that's quite an astounding change just from a prayer. And also even tap water. Austrian engineer Bernhard Rathhauser was building on Dr. Emoto's work, and he built a device that restructures water molecules and assists the water in being its highest vibration as living energy. And when water was passed through this device, he says everything supporting life in the water is enhanced and energy is released. Memory erased and toxins are energetically neutralized. And this last photo of the water that passed through the device, you can see the before and the after effects, and it's quite astounding, really. And so if we just return to music for a while and science, HPB mentions in Isis Unveiled that the ancient Egyptians, they cultivated musical arts too, and they understood well the effects of musical harmony and its influence on the human spirit. She says we can find in the older scriptures and carvings scenes in which musicians play on various instruments. Music was used in the healing departments of the temples for the cure of nervous disorders. Maybe this will become more widespread in future years in the treatment of illness, and maybe health practitioners will become a little bit more holistic in their approach. The universe is built on harmonies, and Pythagoras had it right when he married mathematics and music and the cosmos together. More than 2,500 years ago, according to ancient sources, Pythagoras applied his discoveries in music theory to the behaviors of celestial objects. Pluck a string, and the pitch of the note produced is related to the length of the string. When the lengths of two strings are a simple ratio, like a half, a third, and so on, the notes together sound harmonious. Pythagoras believed the universe itself hummed in its own harmony. Beautiful, divine, but inaudible to human ears. He characterized the intervals between successive orbits, such as those of Mercury and Venus, as either tones or half tones, the smallest intervals in a musical scale. And these add up to 7 whole tones that form a perfectly harmonious natural order. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us to produce harmony, the right notes must be struck, the right vibrations and energy waves released, as mentioned by Nikola Tesla. Harmony involves working with opposites. So dealing with opposing ideas and opposites can be quite difficult, and knowing what to fight, what to change, what to let go is always the tricky part. Sometimes we go to the extreme and we don't even know how we got there. Previous international president in Sri Ram said a person who goes to the extreme will sometimes tend to go to the extreme opposite. For example, those who induce courage by self-suggestion, by putting on an exaggerated brave front, are really just creating a mask, covering up perhaps fear, or perhaps out of revulsion for some feature or disappointment in someone's life, they'll rebound in the opposite direction. And this might result in fanatical behavior, or it might just be plain unhealthy for their health or their mental health. Perhaps a person brought up in an overly religious family may become an atheist. We've all seen that happen. The person brought up in a household with violence as a child, well, they may become violent themselves or possibly swing in the total opposite. They might impose little restrictions on their children, no boundaries. And of course, this introduces its own problems. So what's missing? Well, what's missing here is the middle ground. The Buddha spoke to us of the middle way or the middle path. This is a place of balance where harmony is sure to be found should we but seek it. Nature is built on opposites, which are always intertwined, but it keeps the balance between the two equally. Think of day and night, the 4 seasons. As decay through old age occurs and the leaves fall in the right season, there's also a coming renewal of life and new growth and beginnings. So the struggle of life and death, of passing seasons, this is held in nature's hand, malleable and changing, but always coming back to the center, coming back to where that balance, the state, where various components exist together without destroying each other. So it's the skillful dealing with these polarities and often changing forces in our life that we learn to become more harmonious with our others, or with others, and within our own being. These struggles all present opportunities for growth for us on our spiritual path. And one of the easiest ways to see harmony at work is through the great law of karma. Karma is the harmonizing force of the universe. It's the adjuster, the equalizer that restores broken harmony. It plays out on a wide stage, rebalancing at different levels. We can see it in action in world karma, such as world wars and big climate change and pandemics. This is the broad brush sweeping up millions on its path with its effects. But then there's also national karma, adjusted perhaps through smaller wars or natural disasters that happen in a country. But they can also be favourable in nature. And we see some nations as their star rises in the ascendancy in world affairs. And of course, the most karma aspect we seem to focus on is ourselves, our own personal karma. And this is really instructive for us, but it's difficult to bear at times as well, isn't it? Our actions and our emotions and thoughts create energy and therefore effect. HPB tells us how karma works in a scientific sense as the great law of the universe. It's a very good explanation. She says, think now of a pond. A stone falls into the water and creates disturbing waves. These waves oscillate backwards and forwards until at last, owing to the operation of what physicists call the law of dissipation of energy, they're brought to rest and the water returns to its condition of tranquility. Similarly, all action on every plane produces disturbances in the balanced harmony of the universe, and the vibrations so produced will continue to roll backwards and forwards if its area is limited till equilibrium is restored. And harmony can only be restored by the reconverging to that same point of all the forces which were set in motion from it. And here you have the proof, she says, that the consequences of man's deeds, thoughts, etc. must all react upon himself with the same force with which they were set in motion. So that's very important and interesting. If harmony is disrupted by our thoughts and our deeds, and we know karma is created because of this, we'd be wise to observe ourselves closely and make a study of our own actions and our own motives. And the key to theosophy, HPB describes karma as this law of readjustment, which ever tends to restore equilibrium, disturbed equilibrium in the physical and broken harmony in the moral worlds. We say, she writes, we say that karma does not act in this or that particular way always, but that it does so act as to restore harmony and preserve the balance of equilibrium in virtue of which the universe exists. And the key to theosophy, it also says, good and harmony, evil and disharmony are synonymous. Then Blavatsky says and writes, we maintain that all pain and suffering are results of want of harmony, and that the one terrible and only cause of the disturbance of harmony is selfishness in some form or another. So we see from this, we reap the full consequences of our actions, having to atone for suffering we have caused, but equally reaping in joy and gladness the fruits of all the happiness and harmony we have helped produce. And also note, HPB says the only cause of the disturbance of harmony is selfishness. And this word selfishness comes up quite a bit, time and time again in our theosophical literature. It seems to me to be the root cause of most of the world's pain that lies in selfishness. And this is plain to see, I think, but what can be done about it? And like, what causes it? And what are the main attributes of selfishness? Why do they even exist? Why does it even exist? So having think about it, to me, it seems like there was three main causes, but there's probably a whole lot more. So from my own experiences, people want to control others, and they want to control events as they unfold. And we think, well, why is this? Because we want to feel safe instead of being afraid of the unknown or feeling vulnerable, like somebody lost in the dark. And control is the light switch. But with this comes ramifications of the growing stronger of what is called ahamkara, or the little self, the little I, the ego we talk about. And it really results in the building up of this personality, the small ego. And so we also attract the karmic consequences of our actions towards others, and we know this. And these have to be met at some time in the future. It might be this life, it might be one in the future, but it's inescapable nonetheless. So this is why we need to watch what we do and say. And Jeffrey Hodson, he shows the way out of this folly of caring too much about the small self, this personality. And what he says, he said in The Initiate Life, which is a really great book, the part of us which suffers is ahamkara, the sense of I-ness, of I-amness, the delusion of separated self-personality. We can get rid of this in an utter surrender to the one will and a complete impersonality which literally does not care about the self. Then pain on our own account cannot touch us. Personal accusations and affronts, injustices, gossiping will cause us not one moment of personal sorrow. He or she who has sacrificed self has found the way to peace. And the twin part to this control aspect of people wanting to control is trying to control certain outcomes. And this is generally to make things results in one's favor, isn't it? To our benefit. And we might grow frustrated when the world doesn't actually behave the way we think it should. And our lives don't conform to what our expectations are. So rather than feeling frustrated about this, we could let go. In fact, life is a great series and practices of letting go. The Bhagavad-Gita provides us sound advice here. It tells us when actions are performed, renouncing attachment and desire for the fruits of action, one becomes equal to gain or loss and experiences sameness, which is yoga itself. And this Sameness really just means neither happy nor sad at happenings and the results. So it's in this attitude of non-attachment to outcomes, and by doing right actions with the right intent, we begin to live our life in a way that we don't attract karma to ourselves, both good or bad, because each one of these holds us firmly in the grip of cause and effect and ties us to this wheel of rebirth. The second reason for selfishness, I think, is desire. We want money, we want prestige and status, power, respect, nice housing and cars, etc. All these trinkets of daily living. And grasping this way usually doesn't satisfy us, does it? Because when we reach that car or whatever we're seeking, after a little while, the shine's gone off it. And so we want more, and we still feel empty and unfulfilled. So the Buddha's teaching and the Four Noble Truths, he speaks of this desire and it being the cause of human suffering. He says this is based on temporary and conditional states of being. The Buddha shows us the way to move beyond this state towards enlightenment through the Eightfold Noble Path. Now in this, the very first step of the Noble Eightfold Path is right understanding, or you might call right view. And this is most vital to the seeker. How we see the world is based on many things, and these are largely to do with our conditioning. And there's many ways we get conditioned: religion, culture, schooling, our parents, and society at large, and so forth. And we combine all these things together, and it creates what might be called our own personal worldview. Having a wide view and an open mind is very important to the student treading the razor-edged path. And the third reason is one to do with evolution and the unfoldment of consciousness itself. And we know there are two broad paths. One is called the path of forthgoing, and the other the path of return. Now, on this path of forthgoing, Annie Besant said that human beings are surrounded on every side by desire, objects of desire, and the use of these is to evoke the desire to possess them. And this is to exert stimulation, inspire efforts, and through this, we make faculty and capacity and strength, things like intelligence, alertness, judgment, perseverance, patience, and fortitude. Through learning, the desires will become subtler and more refined as intelligence fashions them and emotions replace passions. But through the treading of the path of forthgoing, the desire for this fruit we talked about in the Bhagavad-Gita, it's necessary and a blameless motivation for exertion. Without this, the man or woman at this stage of evolution becomes lethargic and doesn't evolve at all, really, or it takes a very long time. But once, however, we turn to this path of return, and call it what you like, it might be the path back to the one source, to God, the higher self. Well, the lower aspects of these attributes that we've just created over many lifetimes, they need to be transformed into something higher. For example, greed can be transformed into altruism, pride into modesty. So understanding how we want to live our lives using right understanding and the other modes of right living as taught by the Buddha leads us to consider what values and ethics we then want to live our life by. And there's three main categories of values. In the first, top level, well, these are enduring and time-tested, and they apply to all cultures at all times. And you can see on this list things like truth and love and peace, non-violence, universal brotherhood and sisterhood, etc. So these apply to all cultures and all times. The second sort or set of values, these are cultural values. These are based on social norms religious and cultural traditions and beliefs. That might be religious expression. What's our standard of material comfort that we accept? How much wealth do we have? What's the competition in our society? And our individualism. These drive our behaviours to quite a large extent, but we don't really realise how much. And then we get down to personal values. And these really are based just on our own preferences and the type of temperament and what sort of ray we are and what jobs and talents we have. And so these things are like self-reliance and respect for ourselves. What's our code of personal conduct? How honest are we going to be? What's our morality or our loyalty, our integrity? These things are very individualistic, aren't they? But if you pull them all together, true fulfillment and meaning in life really requires that these personal and cultural values must be in harmony and aligned with the universal values that we saw earlier. And so now we have these values worked out within ourselves and hopefully a wider view on what life is about and what we want to achieve on a personal transformative level through this right understanding. We begin this hard work of transforming the lower nature into something higher. And this is a direct act of harmonizing one's life. So, for example, we transform fear into courage, unbalance into poise, individualism into cooperation, and so forth. And you can see the positives on the left and the negatives on the right. But the trick here is not to fight or dwell on the negative side, because that only gives it more power and energy and makes it stronger. The best method is to ignore the negative side and focus on the opposite trait, the positive aspects. And the Buddha, in the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, hate never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. So by making these positive traits stronger, they become a habit and eventually a part of one's character. It becomes who we are. This can be done not just once in one lifetime, but it's probably many, many lifetimes work, and it takes much effort and much attention. And underlining all of this is ethics. HPB said herself, theosophy is high ethics. And so we have ample guidelines in this department to help us understand what is meant here. And the key to theosophy, it poses the question, have you any ethical system that you carry out in the society? And the theosopher answers, the ethics are there, ready and clear enough for whoever would follow them. They are the essence and cream of the world's ethics, gathered from the teachings of all the world's great reformers. Therefore, you'll find represented therein Confucius and Zoroaster, Lao-Tzu and the Bhagavad-Gita, the precepts of Gautama Buddha and Jesus of Nazareth, of Hillel and his school, Azad, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, and their schools. And HPB's Golden Stairs is a fine example of living one's life with high ethics. Making these a living presence in our life leads towards a happy and harmonious life. Again, this is not easy at first. We don't live in a cave. We have to interact with the world at large and people in it. And here resides conflict and interpersonal relationships. There's a certain need for discord because as human beings, we learn by meeting with adversity and yes, even conflict. These seem to be necessary steps in our unfoldment. And by the way in which we meet these circumstances and react, we either make good or bad karma. But importantly, we learn and grow, and some more quickly than others. But all troubles on the path are gains. Geoffrey Hodgson said, to welcome the storms of life and the storm bringers. He wrote, Everest cannot be climbed without either. A blow is required to cause a spark to leap out of the flint. The adept is fashioned from the man under the hammer of Thor. We should not always judge our misfortunes too harshly either. The writer Alan Watts said, so what is discord at one level of your being is disharmony at another. An illness, bad on one level, may in fact be the final outworkings of karma from some other life. And now restorative harmony is close at hand and will allow the person to move forward in this life. This being harmony restored at another level. And we might think that discord and conflict arise from evil. Is there such a thing as evil? Well, in the well-known Mahatma letters, Master Kathumi said that evil has no existence per se. He wrote, it is the absence of good, and it is perceived as evil only by its victims. Nature in itself is neither good nor evil. She follows only immutable laws, the blind laws of necessity, and hence is not evil. Real evil proceeds from human intelligence, and its origins rest entirely within reasoning man, who disassociates himself from nature. Humanity then alone is the true source of evil. This again suggests what we term as evil is really disharmony, someone disassociating themselves from nature or natural law. If we take a look at opposing forces from another viewpoint, we see that they are in fact perennial forces to be contended with. At the close of the Constitution Convention of 1787 in America, Benjamin Franklin was queried as he left Independence Hall on the final day of their deliberations. And in the notes of Dr. James McHenry, one of the delegates from Maryland at the convention, a lady asked Dr. Franklin, she said, well, doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy? And Franklin replied, a republic, if you can keep it. So we can see by this warning that opposing forces are ever present. The struggle must be fought and refought. We also know these things come in waves because all things are cyclical in nature and the universe. This is one of the core tenets of theosophy. We have good times leading to bad times and bad times leading to good times. But when forces of disharmony become too great, forces of harmony are stepped up a gear. Humanity collectively pushed back on intolerance and controlling forces. And this is very clear in the world wars of the 20th century. But note some of the differences, how society treated those not cooperating with the national war efforts. In some countries, conscientious objectors were fined or went to jail. In others, they were shot. So what's the difference? A more tolerant society in one state. The conditions of a society or nation finds itself in come directly from the inhabitants, many who reincarnate, perhaps several lives in a particular nation. The slow change in society, therefore, will occur as each person transforms themselves, and in doing so, they transform society. So, what is our personal approach? Well, we now have some fundamental basics on harmony and how this can be achieved on a personal level. We live in a world of external disharmony. So how do we negotiate through it, especially when so much is confusing? The suggestions in theosophical literature can also seem to be at odds as well sometimes. But let's take a closer look at a couple of situations that we all probably face at some point in time in our life. So, what do you do if someone insults or attacks you? Well, Jeffrey Hodson said in his book, The Initiate Life, the true occultist never defends himself. There is no need of self-defense. For the righteous, for truth is bound to prevail, to be victorious in the end. The occultist is content to rest upon that law. Okay, well, that message is pretty clear. Suppose now we see someone else being set upon, not ourselves. In HPB's Golden Stairs, which we just saw, we read a valiant defense of those unjustly attacked. Another clear message heard: we should do something in their defense. What if, however, you hold a position in an organization or a school or something like that, which is being undermined through personal attacks on you and your position? Okay, well, not defending oneself might be okay, but then should one defend the people you work with, your co-workers, etc., and the structures of the organization that you work for, assuming they're fair and reasonable? So this sort of situation puts the theosophist in a bit of a quandary. What do? Defend or not defend? Well, each really must decide for themselves based on their values and their ethics. We should have by now settled upon a brave declaration of principles, as stated in the Golden Stairs. To leave things alone, hoping harmony will be restored on its own, is this right or is this wrong? Well, perhaps sometimes harmony can't be restored without some sort of action. Another piece of guidance in how to act is duty. One's duty also features a lot in some theosophical literature, especially in the Mahatma letters to A.P. Sinnett. So we do what we must and attend to what work is before us with our principles at the fore. In letter 43, it says, "Realize, my friend, that social affections have little, if any, control over any true adept in the performance of his duty. In proportion as he rises towards perfect adeptship, the fancies and antipathies of his former self are weakened. He takes all mankind into his heart and regards them in the mass." And again in the Mahatma letters, letter 68, we read, "Does it seem to you a small thing that the past year has been spent only in your family duties? Nay, but what better cause for reward, what better discipline than the daily and hourly performance of duty? Believe me, my pupil, the man or woman who is placed by karma in the midst of small, plain duties and sacrifices and loving kindness will, through these faithfully fulfilled, rise to the larger measure of duty, sacrifice, and charity to all humanity." So, not worrying overly about the outcome of things or the fruits of action as seen in the Bhagavad-Gita, we do our duty, that which is right and just. Wrestling with such matters is an individual concern, and we must all come to our own conclusions, hopefully after much thought and soul searching has been done as to what is the right course of action. So working in a spirit of cooperation and tolerance and goodwill is very important to achieving and maintaining harmony. The philosopher and writer Delia Steinman Guzman said, "Those who are incapable of living in harmony with others are also incapable of living in harmony with themselves. What they can't achieve when working with others, they won't achieve for themselves either." We can see that right conduct in one's life, stemming from right understanding, brings about not only inner tranquility and peace, but also harmonious external relationships. And what occurs outside us ever increasingly cannot disturb the inner poise gained. There's much strength in inner calm and poise, and this is a sure sign of progress. Jeffrey Hodgson said in his diary, "My life is an inconceivably slow apprenticeship for self-mastery, for attainment. One seeks ever a stable center, a faultless wisdom, an unfailing vision, and utter steadfastness between and amidst happiness and pain." It's only through individuals achieving harmony within themselves that society can achieve harmony collectively. As collective harmony is restored, we will see social conditions change. Wars lessen or cease, natural disasters, which is after all nature's own way of restoring equilibrium and harmony. These will also lessen. From the macro viewpoint, this change in world affairs is over a much longer timescale. But the timescale for personal development, however, is here and now. The famous sage Sri Ramana Maharishi said it well when he encouraged us to focus inwardly. He said, self-reform automatically brings about social reform. Confine yourself to self-reform. Social reform will take care of itself. He also said, first reform yourself, and then it will be time enough to think about the world. How can you help the world until you have helped yourself? And indeed, how can the ignorant enlighten the ignorant? Our eyes must be open to comprehend our own personalities, thoughts, patterns, and behaviours. In HPB's mystical book, Voice of the Silence, there's a line about this in a harmony, and it says, before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained. On talks on the path of occultism about the voice of the silence, there's commentary, and the commentary speaks about needing to purify the personality and harmonize it with the soul. It says the personality must be opened up and widened. Until this is done, the personality sees everything and everybody from its own limited and distorted view. And Jeffrey Hodson in his diary tells us that the personality is the barrier, the weakness, the Achilles heel, and the source of our failure. He said their depth and contrast has all their vehicles aligned in perfect harmony. Discord at any level can find no place whatever, no vibrating influence upon the life and the mind of a master of the wisdom. Further along in the voice of the silence, it talks about Shaila, which generally translates simply as conduct. And in this, HPB emphasizes the idea of harmony. Our theosophical concepts of conduct go beyond the normal rules and conventions of society, because we look to the principles of the spiritual life, which adheres to truth, love, and a life of service, leaving no room for personal self-indulgence. We are each the decreer of our own lives and what moral and ethical standards we live our life by. One can imagine, as one treads further along the path and our vista expands, these self-imposed rules do become quite a bit more stringent, but most likely they feel right, and we'd no longer be chafing under them, but see them as naturally fitting our new modes of life. So the message is quite clear. Look within, work upon yourself, and from Marcus Aurelius, he who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe. So in summary, we have our topic in a nutshell. Harmony is the smooth flow of life, where we have established a balance between our inner world and the external world. It is a place where we have made peace with ourselves. True harmony is also founded upon karma, but this too has an end, where the high art hat has outworked their adverse karma and paid their debts at every level to all life and all living beings. Mr. Hodson, in his diary, he says that harmony is the secret treasure, the priceless privilege of all who have utterly outgrown the errors of untruth and the discordance with which that is intimately involved. I've always admired the undisturbed yogis facing favor or adversity with equal indifference, because they've attained that inner poise, that harmony within, which no winds of fortune seem to be able to disturb. And many years ago, I was in Australia talking with an older member of the society, And we're just chatting about things generally, theosophical things on a warm afternoon on a balcony. And we're reminiscing, or he was reminiscing about when the international president N. Sri Ram came to Australia many years earlier. And he asked Sri Ram, he said, with all the intrigues and the petty squabbles going on in Adyar and elsewhere in the TS world, he said, how do you cope with all of that? Does it upset you? And he said, Sri Ram just turned to him quietly and said, it's all just wind blowing in the leaves. It's all just wind blowing in the leaves. And I thought this was a wonderful attitude to aspire to. Discord is all temporary, conditioned, and unimportant. Let it go, and don't let it take one away from the equipoise gained, the calmness in the centre of one's core. I remind myself of Sri Ram's reply often when I feel disturbed. So work with the laws and forces of nature, not against them. The man in a boat who sets a sail so that he may go against the wind is not overcoming the wind, but is harmonizing his fears with nature's laws. In working with the laws of nature, the human being gains a wider understanding and is no longer fighting against the tide. And I'd like here to quote Colossians in the Bible, which says, and above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. I'd now like to finish with a small story that demonstrates what can happen when harmony is given a chance. On a rainy night on New Year's Eve, a lonely little girl was saddened by the disagreements that were brought upon her family members. The little girl sadly said, it's New Year's Eve, but it's been raining all day long. New Year is coming, but no one is in a good mood. Brother insists on buying a new bike. Dad and mum and brother are quarrelling about it again. Dad told brother, can't you use the old bike? You just know how to spend money. Mother also said to brother, the economy is bad. Why don't you just use the old one? And brother angrily said back, the old bike breaks down all the time. You use it, I won't. It's all your fault. You've spoiled him, Dad shouted to mum. The little girl asked herself, it's New Year, but why is everyone unhappy? Kitty, can you tell me how to make everyone happy for the new year? The little girl said to her cat sadly. Then outside the window, the little girl looked up and saw 4 old men coming up the pathway. Mum, Dad, look, brother, come see, quick. Mum said to the old men, it's raining so heavily, sirs. Please come in for shelter. The old man won. He said, thank you for your kindness, ma'am, but we have a rule. Only one of the 4 of us can come in. Who do you wish to invite in? The 4 old men then introduced themselves one by one. Old man 2 said, I am wealth. Old man 3, I am success. Old man 4, I am well-being. Old man 1 said with a laugh, everyone calls me harmony. Dad said to the 4 old men, surely we should invite in wealth. Then we can have a comfortable life. Brother said, no, choose success. I want my family to be proud of me. Mum said, wait a moment. I think well-being. This is the most important. Dad exclaimed, wealth. Brother exclaimed, success. Mum exclaimed, well-being. The little girl asked her mother, Mum, what about harmony? Why don't you invite in harmony? Dad said, yes, you're right. Why don't we invite in harmony? New Year is here. We should be harmonious. Let's invite Mr. Harmony in then. Seeing that all of the 4 old men came in together, the little girl's father said, hey, I thought you said only one of you can come in. Why did all of you come in? Old man 1 replied, we have another rule. If harmony enters, well-being, success and wealth will follow. The little girl happily said, now I understand. To be happy is to be in harmony. Thank you very much.